Remember that time that Bungie said they gutted subclass customization? Not to balance the game, not to add identity to the subclasses, not because people were just picking the same set of perks anyways. In fact, it was because people were not picking the same set of perks anyways, and they felt that people were too stupid to really grok subclass customization. Because, as with all things, we must cater to the casual player.
Actually, I was hoping you could talk about a few of those small touches, because they're actually, if you go in the subclass menu, right, it's different now. Which was like, everyone takes that first, like, oh my god.
Yeah, like the first thing is that the subclass menu has, a couple basic choices about your class ability, and then, movement mode and grenade, and then you pick your super. But then there are two paths, right? We're trying to make it easier for people to have like an optimal build and just focus. These four elements go together. They do them, and you can play it in a certain way. And then there's these other distinct 4 elements that work together. Instead of like, Luke would like look at me. He never plays a game with me. I'm just like not good enough for him or whatever. But he like inspect my character all the time to just like make sure I'm playing and stuff. Or he can like rag me at the office, and he's like, "What the hell are you doing with your like warlock, man? You got this helmet on with that thing, and you got this thing all agility.
Where's your
like
Viking funeral?
You got to set up all wrong. Like, what do you like? Do you even know how to play this game? And I'm like, oh, shame. And now like I can't really screw that up, right? Like you're just like, oh, I'm pick the one on the top, and I can still do the wrong things.
Yeah.
Right. But like there are like 2 optimal ways to play now. And I can like figure that out, and the space is easier for me to grok.
What's going on, ladies and gents, boys and girls, guardians of all ages, Joker back again, once again. So I know it's trite, I know it's ignorantly hopeful, I know it's wishful thinking, I know it's tipping my hand and displaying for all the world to see just how optimistic about the future of Destiny I really am. As opposed to what those idiots on Reddit would have you believe. But the truth is, I am absolutely positively hopeful for the future of Destiny 2. More specifically, the fall or winter DLC if it gets delayed, because here's the reality of the situation. Bungie cannot fuck this up. I mean, imagine if the fall expansion came out and it's just more of the same that we've already been doing, or even like slightly resembles more of the same of what we've already been doing. Destiny 2 really would be an Anthem 2.0. And as extreme as that sounds, I don't think the game can take much more of, well, like I said, more of the same. No, I think, because it would almost be a necessity at this point, given the fact that Bungie required 2 satellite studios to help with content development over the last 3 to 4 years, that the rumors that the fall expansion is just a retooled Destiny 3 are true. But I'm getting a little off into left field. The other day, I saw an interesting statistic in an article written by Paul Tassi called Destiny 2 Players Weigh In For or Against Weapons Sunsetting. With 6,500 votes, here are the results. 58% of players are against sunsetting, 34 players are for it, 8% don't know. Now, this video isn't here to talk about sunsetting in any significant way. We've already done that. You know my opinion, and given this healthy sample size, statistically, we can at the very least infer that the idea of sunsetting is not a very popular idea within large segments of the Destiny community. One of the arguments that I hear a lot from the pro-sunsetting camp is, well, Destiny is an MMO. An argument that gets thrown out the window anytime you compare Destiny to actual MMOs in a less than flattering, basic fucking standard sort of way. But I digress. Their argument ultimately comes down to, well, because Destiny is an MMO, it should be like other MMOs and sunset gear to give us a reason to play. In fact, in my very own video on sunsetting, I concede that if Destiny had anything like the scope and scale of player customization, gear, and abilities that other MMOs have, then sunsetting wouldn't really be an issue. The simple fact of the matter is, in an MMO, everything that's truly important to your character and the way you play is right there on the hotbar. These are all your skills, all your attacks, and while gear might enhance those abilities or morph them slightly with more functionality, most gear in MMOs, generally speaking, are nothing more than stat sticks. The core of what makes your character, what makes your playstyle, is on the hotbar. And while you might grind from quest to quest to unlock new abilities, once they're unlocked, they're unlocked.
But Joker!
I hear your shrill, tremulous voice cry out in anguish. You're only level 42 in Final Fantasy XIV. You don't know how the endgame works. One, it's a really stupid, disingenuous comment. I spent like 3 hours researching the name for my character just so I could make it lore-friendly. Do you fucking think I didn't take at least a couple of minutes to figure out how gearing and leveling works? Get the fuck out of here with that. And 2, fine, don't take my word for it. Here's somebody who's played Final Fantasy XIV for a long time and has clearly done the end game and knows what they're talking about.
A step forward and 3, 4, 5 steps back.
Yeah, my main problem with sunsetting is one that I've talked about a lot, and it's probably the core issue most people have. When people like refer to like, well, this is how it works in MMOs, don't you know that? It's like, okay, false equivalence. One, because most gear in MMOs are just stat sticks. Like plus this intelligence, plus skill speed. They don't actually change the core fundamentals of what your character does, which is based on like, I level up, I get new skills. These skills are with me forever, right? Unless they're balanced or they're changed in future updates or they're upgraded, blah, 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 blah. The problem with in Destiny, our gear is our character. Like we don't have identity. Like our weapons increase our damage we deal. Our weapons make shit explode. Exotics themselves do all kinds of different things. It's a good thing exotics aren't being sunsetted, but our legendary gear defines our character. So imagine you are rolling in an MMO and then the next expansion you have to like start leveling up abilities you had the previous expansion. That would be ridiculous. Like it would be dumb. Like everyone would be like, why am I regrinding the skill tree I already grinded from the last expansion? That's the closest to true comparison of what is happening, because
most MMOs have more content.
And most MMOs treat little stat sticks better than Destiny treats their guns, because I can transmog my stat stick. Like in Final Fantasy, I have this sick fucking level 66 like Dome and Steel gunblade. Of course, I can't like bring its stats to level 80, but I can transmog it onto my current gunblade, and lo and behold, I have this sick fucking Dome and Steel gunblade on my back. I could take that shit with me forever if I wanted to. And that's tight because I'm connected to that gun. So it's just kind of weird to me that Bungie is like, and a lot of the community is like, man, like as a game dev, like I hate seeing people love their loot. Like that's just bad player engagement, So
thank you, Blue and the GG over Easy crew for that insightful retort. But I digress. In Destiny, players have an extremely limited set of skills, and depending on the class, a large portion of everything you do is really only tied to one noticeable gameplay ability, like Hunter Dodge, or Warlock Dash, or Titan Shoulder Charge, or your super. But there's no real depth to it. The limitation of these skill trees not only limit the way that we can engage with the game and gameplay loops, but puts an overbearing necessity on weapons and perks. Now, the reality of the situation is that's always going to be how the game works. Weapons will always be our primary way of engaging with content, short of Bungie going a more RPG route, like say Dragon Age or Mass Effect, or I don't know, Final Fantasy XIV, and letting us be more than a glorified gun that sometimes talks. However, the main reason we keep hearing about sunsetting is because Bungie wants to change the way that we play. At least that's what they say. But one has to wonder, how does nuking 80% of the weapons in the game and limiting the number of weapon and options and archetypes going to help gameplay diversity and not homogenize it even further? More so, when we already have a problem with Bungie making enough weapons for any individual content release. If you wanted to really evolve the way that players play the game, wouldn't it make more sense to start with the player character? I mean, when you go after weapons and gear, it just kind of makes it look like you're artificially inflating the playtime of the game to get people to grind content that they normally wouldn't play, but have to because they need to become meta viable for the content that they actually want to play. But hey, fucking details. Evolving the subclasses, and I don't just mean adding a new set of nodes or a darkness subclass, I mean looking at the nodes that we currently have and expanding those with loads of new perks and abilities to choose from is what will truly evolve the game. Now, some of you might be wondering or even furiously typing away in the comments, but Joker! If we expand the perk pools, subclasses will lose their identity, as everyone will just pick the same subclass. Which is slightly amusing because, one, that's already basically what everybody's doing anyways. Most people pick the meta-viable subclass grouping, so it's not like everybody's running around with divergent subclasses. So subclass customization is already extremely homogenized. And two, they don't necessarily need to unlock all the perks for all classes on all builds. What they could do is they could go into Code of the Striker and add a dozen new perks, then go into Code of the Missile, and add a dozen new perks. And then, gasp, shock, horror, follow me on this one, go into Code of the Juggernaut, and add a dozen new perks. And then, of course, do so for each and every class's subclasses. Now, not only does this change open up player choice, but we've also opened up a lot of quest opportunities. In Final Fantasy XIV, for example, a new ability might come as a reward for reaching a new level, and then embarking on a story-focused quest that brings you further into understanding what it means to play that class. It gives you lore, it introduces you to new and interesting NPCs that exemplify that class. This also creates a vehicle for new armor. Specifically, exotics. I think it's fairly obvious to anyone with a pair of eyeballs and a working brainstem that my favorite exotic piece of armor from Destiny 1 was the Helm of Saint 14. I kid, of course, it's the Helm of Inmost Light. And you could not do the Helm of Inmost Light in Destiny 2, as it is now, and have the same experience you would in Destiny 1. For those of you who do not know or don't remember, the Helm of Inmost Light provided 2 perks from your subclass tree for just wearing the helmet. It provided Death from Above and Headstrong. This, of course, allowed you to pick 2 other perks within the Striker Titan subclass tree. Essentially, by default, the Helm of Inmost Light is a Destiny 2 subclass in and of itself. Yeah, that's kinda wild when you think about it. One helmet in Destiny 1 had more diversity and impact on the way that you play the game than the entirety of a Destiny 2 subclass. So if Bungie wanted to bring the Helm of Inmost Light back now, it would be in name only, as we've seen with some other reprised exotics brought forward from Destiny 1 into Destiny 2. But what if brought back, the Helm of Inmost Light didn't have to lose its functionality? At its core, the Helm of Inmost Light gives you 2 perks so that you can select 2 other perks from your subclass tree. If Destiny 2 expanded the subclass trees, this would no longer be an issue. Now, what if Bungie designed exotics like this for other classes as well, to further augment the way that players interact with the game? Exotics that perhaps, for example, just as long as you're playing an Arc Titan, would grant you perks from the other 2 Arc Titan subclasses. Or an exotic that fundamentally changes the way that your super works. For example, and I know Radiance is kind of a contentious thing within the community, but just listen. Because this is nothing more than an example, they could put a new exotic in the game that changes Dawnblade into Radiance. Instead of these lackluster exotics that we get where it's like, if you stand in your well as a warlock, you can see through walls, kind of, sort of. But I digress once again. In my opinion, it is a much more natural way of evolving the game and diversifying the way that players play with the game by addressing and expanding all the subclasses instead of the artificialness of sunsetting everybody's weapons and gear to basically make people grind for the same things over and over again, or worse, potentially be shit out of luck if A, the archetype of weapon that they like isn't represented, or B, is represented, but the 1 or 2 weapons that represent this archetype have bad scopes, bad perk pools, bad stats, which happens all the time. Subclasses, in my opinion, outside of changing the fundamental way that Destiny tells stories or the way that we interact with the game, is really the next frontier of evolution when it comes to the franchise. But hey, those are just my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Remember to leave a like, but only if you did. Subscribe and hit that bell notification for more. Feel free to donate to my Patreon if you are feeling particularly generous. But above all else, stay frosty.